Welcome to Competencies Without a Classroom. This podcast is listened to by middle school and high school students and their teachers. These are busy people. So if it's cool with you, we're going to cut right into it. No fluff. Right?
Yeah, sure.
The first question we ask all of our guests, we ask this for a number of reasons. One, we're going to generate a cool little report at the end of the season, but really this is because this is the question that our listeners want an answer to. So Callum, pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
It's definitely a yes, because Damien, you don't even know this, but I am vegan, and my pizza toppings are restricted, obviously. So
Yeah.
I get what I can take, and yeah, definitely a yes.
Regardless of lifestyle choices, man, it's the right answer. And now that you've won our listeners over, because I'm assuming they're all pineapple on pizza people as well. Callum, Bramley, who are you and what do you do for work?
Yeah, so yeah, like you said, Callum Bramley, and I am tech sales instructor at Uvaro.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is a tech sales instructor for a 16-year-old who's listening to this?
Yeah, so I mean, Uvaro, we are a tech sales career accelerator. So 12-week program, we run a class, and with the class, you get an instructor. I'm the instructor. So I run classes, 2-hour classes. I run a couple of classes simultaneously. So for example, 9 till 11 a.m. And then I take another class at 12 till 2 p.m. So essentially what I'm doing is giving a little bit of coaching, some feedback, skilling up in terms of sales, but most specifically in the tech world.
Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. And this is a good time to segue into one of the features that we call the hog. So at My Blueprint, what we do at many of our meetings is something we've started to do recently to make our meetings a little bit more efficient, is that when you're adding items to the agenda, you have to add the amount of time you're going to speak to it, and you have to label it. Usually it's either an update, a discussion, or a decision. Once a meeting, though, it can be the hog, where you have a little bit more time to speak passionately about something that's super relevant for that week's meeting and that week's conversation.
Yeah.
Now, this is a question I'm super excited to ask, and I'm super pumped to have you on the show because I'm such a fan of Uvaro and what you guys are doing to help elevate the profession. I wear many hats in the job that I do with My Blueprint, but sales is a big part of my job. And I'm going to quote this guy named John Barrows. He's a thought leader in the sales world. And he says something to the effect of sales is the best job in the world when it's done right, but it's the worst profession in the world when it's done wrong. And, you know, a lot of people listening to this, students may not know this yet, but there's no like clear path really until what's starting to change now, thanks to things like Uvaro, but you don't go to school for sales. So maybe let's use the hog, Callum, for you to talk a little bit about why Uvaro was created and the need that it's solving today.
Yeah, I mean, you spoke to it there a little bit, is that not a lot of people go to school for sales, right? It doesn't really exist. There's no university degree that you can go through and get an MBA in sales, right? But there's a growing need for it, especially in the tech sector. Tech is, especially in certain hubs in North America where we sort of have most of our recruits. I'm based in Toronto, just like you are, Damien.
Yeah.
It's the place to be, really, in Toronto, is tech. And if you want to be in tech, there are different roles you can get into, obviously product, and there's maybe marketing, HR, etc. But sales specifically, there's not a lot of stuff out there where you can, like I said, go through schooling, get an education, and be certified in sales. So that's a bit of a gap there. People tend to, and I say this about myself especially, and maybe you can empathize, Damien, fall into sales.
Yeah.
Maybe they have that misdirection, they go through university, they get a degree they don't really know what to do with, and then, you know, because they need to pay the bills, look for a job, sales might fit the bill, give it a shot and see if it fits. That tends to be the trend towards sales for a lot of people. And then you get people who are very good at it, they pick it up and it works out. What we want to do at Uvaro is give those people who have identified themselves as, I want to give sales a shot. And I think tech sales is a fit for me because I like the software industry overall. Give them an unfair advantage, essentially. Right. Because people come into it as an entry-level role when they are what we define in tech sales as sales development representatives, business development representatives. the people who are trying to create opportunities and create pipeline for the salespeople who are closing, those tend to more and more be entry-level jobs, but let's skill up those people so they can hit the ground running, know exactly what they're doing on day one, and then week two, get on the phones quicker, ultimately hit the ground quicker and make money quicker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what, man, I think that's so important. And for the context of, I'm just putting myself back in the shoes of when I was a 16-year-old listening to this. I didn't know like tech sales was a thing. And you know, you touched on it, like fall into this profession. Yes, the large majority of people who work in sales typically fall in that profession because, again, maybe they finished their undergrad, or maybe they're at a certain point of life and they're not sure what to do. They've recognized that sales is often a profession with a low barrier to entry, with a high potential outcome as far as the money you can make from being in this profession, right?
It's my favorite thing to say.
Yeah. I stole it from you from our conversation before we started. But that's why I'm so excited about Uvaro. And slowly but surely, there's others that are starting to come about. Like Eric Jansen is teaching a course at Ivy, University of Western, for anybody who's listening in Ontario or thinking about going to Western. And he's a really smart guy, so it's a powerful course. And, you know, I'm sure there's many reasons why people don't intentionally get into sales and they end up falling into sales. But I think the two that just came to my mind as you were talking, one of them is technically, I guess you're solving both problems. But the first one is just that there is no clear path, right? That it is something you fall into. So if students can learn about what you're actually doing as a sales professional and the opportunities that it provides you, and there's a clear path to pursue, then they can be intentional about saying, this is where I want to go. Because I've met so many amazingly talented and smart people that are working in this profession, and they just happen to fall into it by chance. And thank God they did, because they're helping to elevate this profession. But I think we need more people who want to and be intentional about working in this space. And that leads me to the second point of why I don't think that's happening, is just because there still is a stigma around the world, you know, sales representative, right? And especially when you're in high school and before you start working in tech or in the real world, when you hear about sales, you know, you default to the used car salesman. And then it's just not what it is, especially in 2020. The amount of ingenuity and creativity and resourcefulness and smarts, honestly, IQ and EQ that it takes to be successful in this profession. Obviously, I'm a little bit biased right now, but it's an extremely exciting profession. And like I said with John Barrows before, it's the best one in the world if it's done right. So really happy that Uvaro is helping to move that into a new light. And hopefully this will help educate some of the high school students listening to this about that it's not what you think it is, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing I can say to that, Damien, just to sort of riff off you, is that the perception of salespeople, like if people who are looking at this podcast rather than just listening in the audio fashion, I'm wearing a 10-tree hat and I'm sat at my kitchen table, and I am a salesperson. I'm not, you know, with a suit on, and I'm not slick back hair, and I'm not selling used cars or anything like that.
Right.
It's a very different perception in tech sales. Like
things are changing 100%. Yeah. And actually, so let's talk about that a little bit more, because one of my favorite things about working in this profession is just the opportunities that it's provided me in my short career. And, you know, I think I can easily say the same thing for you, Callum. The first time we connected, you were not a tech sales instructor for Uvaro. So can you speak a little bit to your journey and the chances you've had to grow in your short career?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it probably starts, and this might be a long-winded story, so pay attention.
Yeah, that's okay.
I'm not originally from Canada. I mentioned I'm based in Toronto right now, but I'm from the north of England. Moved over here when I was 23, and that's a while ago, so I don't want to give my age away. I needed that job. I needed to sort of take what I could get, otherwise I'm packing my bags again and going back home to England. You know, really need to find a job to pay the bills, to live here for a little bit like I wanted to. And the one job that I did find was sales, but it wasn't tech sales. I was selling retirement residences.
Okay.
Very different, but in a lot of ways, very similar, right? And I saw some transition there the longer I worked there, that I could take these skills and apply them to tech sales specifically. So that was my grounding in sales, is selling retirement residences. This was in the Toronto area again. I spent there a few years there. I looked at tech sales as a career. I suddenly hit that sort of imposter syndrome of, could I really do this? You know, I know what I'm good at now, and I might as well stick with this, or can I take a chance, or am I just an imposter, right? If I try to take on tech sales. Ultimately took that leap. started as what I referred to earlier as a business development representative at a tech company in Toronto, quickly moved up to what was defined as an account executive. So that is that closing role where you have a quota to hit. I need to close. I need to bring new customers on board. I need to sell this product to these people through the medium of selling remotely. So all my demonstrations were done on my computer, and people would join on Zoom. So I've been, and you, Damien, as well, been using Zoom for years, not just because of COVID. We're well familiar with it now, right? That's how I was primarily selling. And then that escalated to move into what I defined as a bigger company, moving up in terms of deal sizes, bigger money. And that has now evolved into tech sales instructor, which is much more of a coaching role rather than a closing role. So now I'm, in a sense, giving back a little bit and I'm trying to get these people who are recruits to that point where they are closing, hitting quota, and making sort of the money and the rewards that do come with that.
But I mean, if you think about that, in a short amount of time, you're able to change what you're doing and grow and learn so many times to the point where you're now teaching people how to do what you were only doing a few years ago, right? Which is pretty cool.
It's very cool, yeah.
We'll stop riffing on sales because I'm sure we could talk about it all day. But for the high school students, that are listening, we explained that things are different in 2020 and that it is exciting and it has a lot of upside. Really, I think, and maybe Callum, maybe you have a different way of explaining it, but the role of a salesperson in our world today is to help solve problems and add value, right? So when you're working with partners, when you're working with potential customers, you have a conversation with them, identify, depending on what industry they're in, what problems they're facing right now, figure out if your solution can solve that problem for them and work with them to create value for their business. So it's not pushing a car on them that they didn't need and using some weird trick to get there. It's legitimately becoming a partner and making sure that you can add value to their business. So it's a great way to think about it. And it's a lifeline of every company because as sales grow, so do the business. So it's a very, very valuable part of the team. Okay, Callum. So obviously we've talked about what you do during 9 to 5. What's something that keeps you busy between 5 and 9?
So, I mean, I am married. I've got a house here in Toronto as well. So like dog, I really like rescue dogs in particular. Like that actually got me the job at when we met, I was selling a kite to you, right? Or we were doing a demo. That's actually how I got that job, right? I don't want to go back to sales specifically, but I did a presentation for the CEO of that company and it was centered around why you would rescue and adopt a dog, right?
That's so great.
So that was a personalized way of sort of getting it in there. And he liked it and that's how I hopped on board. So there's that. And then I just general interest, I'm a big football fan, as we talked about before we started recording. When I say football, guys, I know this is North American people listen to this, but it's football that is known as soccer over here. That's the only time you're going to hear me say that word. I'll go back to football. And then I am a big sort of running triathlete enthusiast. I'm not fast by any means. I'm okay with running. Can't really swim too well. So I've done a couple of triathlons and I hope to try and do a little bit more try and build up to Ironman, but we'll see if we can get there.
Oh, you're light years ahead of me, man. I'm not a great swimmer either, so I opt for the duathlon. I've done a couple of those now where that's just running and biking.
You know what? As soon as you put that suit on, it just floats, and all you got to do is just keep moving.
What kind of dog did you end up with from the rescue? Is it a mutt or?
He's a Bichon Frise mixed with a poodle. Yeah. So we actually signed up to a foster agency a while ago. In Toronto, we're West End. We live near the airport, so dogs do come in from Dominican, Mexico, street dogs. They get rescued, brought to Canada, get adopted. So we would do an overnight respite kind of situation where they could just sleep the night, and then people might drive down from places like Barrie or Northern Ontario to pick up the dog that they adopted. They're taken up from us. So we used to do that for a little bit too.
Well, thanks for doing that, and that's big of you. We've talked about doing that here, my girlfriend and I, but too soft when it comes to that stuff. So the first foster dog that we would have would stay. So we have to be ready for it. Yeah. All right, Callum, are you on Instagram?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I love Instagram. It's a love-hate relationship. I still have an account, but I've removed it from my phone just because a couple of reasons. It was a time suck for me. And two, I came to the conclusion that it wasn't real. more often than not, the stuff that people are posting it's their highlight reel, it's their best ofs, right? So it's not authentic. Reason I ask is I usually use this as a segue to say, and you just talked about your journey of those experiences that you've learned in the last little decade or so. What's a failure that you've encountered in your professional career or otherwise that you think it would be important to speak to for the 16-year-olds listening to this?
I have to be honest, like you fail in sales.
Yeah.
Like all the time. And
Yeah.
it's the thing that you have to adjust to is being okay with that failure. Because if you're a good salesperson, you'll learn from it every single time, right? Damien, you've been in a closing role before, which is a sales role where you try to get someone to buy your service or your product. And if they don't, then you failed. That's the majority of sales. Yeah. Like if you're closing 20% of those deals, you're a pretty good salesperson, right? Yeah. So 80% of the time you're losing, but that 80% of the time, that failure is where you learn the most, right? So you can look back, what did I miss here? Or what could I have done better? And I'll know for the next time when a similar situation comes around, what not to do, maybe.
Yeah, and that's a great message that failure is definitely a part of this profession, and you have to know that going into it. But that is one of the reasons why I love it so much, is that you're learning from each one and getting better each time. So that's a great answer, man. Callum, with Kai, with Uvaro, you ever been involved in a hiring decision? Like, have you helped hire someone before?
Pretty recently, yeah.
Okay, well, this will be good. It'll be top of your mind. So let's say you get 2 resumes. They look the exact same on paper, same experience, same everything. What have you learned from your experiences, whether before or just recently? Like, what do you look for that's going to help separate one candidate from the other? What are those skills?
You know what? Like, it's actually the better way for me to give an anecdote on this is actually thinking about our course, because part of our course is career coaching, and we have a career coach, Alex, who is part of what we offer. It's not just me as a tech sales instructor trying to give advice on things like building a resume and interviewing. We bring in Alex for this too. And we sort of riff off each other in class. And there are things that stand out. A lot of times in tech, culture is right up here. So are you a culture fit? What are your values, and will your values that you bring to our company fit with what we are trying to get across in terms of our values?
Right.
There's also coachability. Can this person, especially when I'm talking in SDR, sales development rep, those entry-level tech sales roles, is this person going to be coachable enough that I can turn them into like a really great salesperson for our organization? Can we see that in the hiring process? And adaptability is going to be huge. Especially in tech, once again, I'm concentrating a lot of my answers on tech. Tech is a very fast-growing industry. If you land at a company, especially an early company, there's going to be changes all the time, right? And you're going to have to be able to adapt to those changes very quickly. So is this person adaptable is the other thing that I would say.
Those are great answers. And while they're definitely something that you hear a lot in tech and in sales, I think those are things that students listening to this are going to be important for you no matter what type of role and industry you're looking at, especially the coachability piece. That's something you're doing right now in school that, if you hand in an assignment, you get some feedback, you want to make sure to actually apply that feedback on the next iteration of that essay or whatever it is, right?
And it does. And on the other end of it, when you see someone being coachable, it makes you feel so great. Right? That you see that they're applying what you've given in terms of feedback the next time around. If you put that in an actual full-time role, like in the professional world, it would be great for sure.
So maybe you can speak to this a little bit. Obviously, it sounds like Alex is the one who's probably helping out a bit more with this as a career coach, but what are you recommending to your students as they're applying for jobs to actually help them stand out from the crowd, right? Because it's easy for the resume to get lost in the pile, right? Like what are your students doing to get noticed and actually get that interview?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that jump to mind. Knowing value is going to be huge. So what value could I bring? What research have I done in terms of this organization? What do they do? What role am I trying to fill? And where can I provide value? And sort of riffing on that a little bit, the other thing that jumps to mind is transferable skills. Okay? So if this is the first time I'm hopping into this industry or this role, I'm straight out of school and I want to find something, what transferable skills do I have right now that I can bring here? And that could be something personable, right? I've interviewed in roles before where transferable skills, I've had to admit, I've never done this before. That's what I said in my tech sales interview for that BDR role. I've never done this before. but I am very disciplined. I told them that at that moment I was training, and this is humble brag, for a marathon. And with that was a very rigid sort of like regimen of, I have to get up at 5 a.m. to do this run or else I may fail, right? And that sort of attitude is what I will bring to this role.
Yeah.
Right? So even though I couldn't bring anything in terms of direct, relatable experience, I could find something in my personal life that was transferable.
Yeah, that, and like for the companies that you are applying to recognize your skills and your values, and look for the companies where those align, right? So there's going to be some companies, and to your point earlier about culture, where you're just not a great fit. But if there are companies that you think your skill set aligns with, seek them out first and make it known that you have the things that are going to make you a good fit at that organization, right? Callum, thinking back to high school, what's a life skill that you weren't taught in high school, but that you wish you were?
I really wish I was taught more financial acumen. You know, there's just been sound with a lot of that. You have to have a little bit of a degree of that. And I think I've got better just because of being in sales, right? You know, because it's just part of the role that you need to understand money a little bit and percentages and all of this stuff. That is the one thing that jumps out to me, and I wish I was as better on.
Yeah, 100%. And everything from taxes just to finance 101, right? And I'm hoping to have a bunch of different people from the sales world on that podcast, primarily for a couple of reasons. One, I subconsciously want to help elevate this profession a little bit. But two, I firmly believe that sales skills are life skills. My assertiveness, everything from just being able to use a calendar properly, the way that I communicate with people, just the body language and the eye contact, like so many things that I find value from outside of my 9 to 5 are because of the experience that I've had working in this profession. So yeah, 100% agree with that. Okay, let's move into some rapid fire questions for Callum. Okay. I borrowed this one from Tim Ferriss. If you could write anything on a billboard, say it's in Times Square, everyone's going to see it, what would it say?
And it'd be cheesy and say ABC, always be closing.
Okay. Yeah. That's fair. You live in this world. I get it. IQ or EQ? You can only pick one. Which one are you picking?
EQ for sure.
Okay. Yeah. Hands down. Did you have a favorite class, maybe a favorite subject in high school?
English.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Still something you're passionate about, or do you write?
No, I don't write other than when I was in school. Yeah. I did like the use of language, and I've incorporated that into sales roles now. I don't want to digress too much, but it is important how you frame things like questions and answers, and what words you choose when you're asking people and trying to uncover what their pain is and how you can solve it. It's very applicable.
It's actually a huge skill, obviously, because in the world we're living in today, a lot of conversation is done through email. People get a lot of emails, so your emails have to be impactful and cut through the noise. So yeah, I agree. I wouldn't have said English was one of my favorite classes in high school, but now I probably spend more time reading up on copywriting and behavioral psychology, just to have a better understanding on what words will create a certain impact when that person reads it. So it's a great answer. Yeah. Did you have a favorite teacher growing up? Anybody that really sticks out to you?
I have to be honest and say no. I was thinking about this question for a while, and I wish I could say yes, but not that I disliked any of the teachers. They're all great. It's just a very even keel at my school.
I was going to say, you just had so many great ones.
Yeah, exactly.
You were very lucky in that respect.
Yeah. Okay, I mean, there are certain standout, but it's nothing really that would be interesting to share on a podcast. That's just more of a who were friendly, and you could have a bit of banter at school with some teachers, which went a long way for sure when you're a teenager, right? So.
For sure. Okay. Do you have a book that you've read that you maybe wish you would have read before you're 18?
Yeah. So I do. There was a book. Well, it wasn't even out before I was 18, so it's impossible. But Scott Jurek, with a J at the start of his name, wrote a book called Eat and Run. I already mentioned I'm vegan, and I don't want to just beat the drum of veganism on this podcast, because that's not what it's about, and I'm just living a stereotype that vegans always talk about themselves. But that book really taught me two things about eating and running in the title, right? Okay. The guy, it's an incredible story. He won ultra marathons in the middle of the desert, like baking heat. I think he won 10 in a row or something like that, and there's a whole story behind that. That was a great book, and it really motivational book at the same time, because when you're reading it, you're sat down and you'll just feel lazy because you're sat down. You want to put it down and go out and run, right?
Yeah.
So,
those stories pump me up so much. Like I watch the plant-based documentaries on Netflix all the time. There was one recently about this bodybuilder who's just dominating, and he was all plant-based, just trying to dispel the myth of that your protein has to come from an animal kind of thing. So we'll link to that book in the show notes. Let's do one more. Repeat and finish the sentence. If I was 18 again, I would.
If I was 18 again, I would try a little bit harder in university. My I'd say focus might have dipped a little bit in university at 18. As I've already alluded to, football is a passion of mine, and that's tended to overtake my focus from 18 onwards. Not that I was a hooligan or anything, guys, for anyone that's listening. It's not all like that in England at all. It's just that I was so involved in, here's my money, I'm going to go and spend that money on watching football, and from Monday to Friday, whatever happens. But, I went to class, but it was sort of meeting the bare minimum, I would say.
That's a good message for everyone listening. That hindsight's 2020, so it's easy to do it, but focus on your academics when you're in school, right? Yeah. Okay, let's close this up. So, hypothetical scenario, Callum, you're superintendent of a school board, and you're tasked with deciding one competency or one skill that all of your students who are graduating, they need to display evidence of in their portfolio. What is that one skill?
I'm going to use empathy as a skill. Yeah. And again, I'm just chiming back to my role as an instructor here and where that plays into sales. I'm sure you can appreciate, Damien, if you're not empathetic and you're not speaking to people in an empathetic way, and you're not humanizing conversations on like a one-to-one level, like I'm a human talking to another human. Yeah, I'm trying to sell a product to you, and we're trying to exchange value because you've got a pain that needs solving, and maybe we can solve that. When it comes down to it, we're just two humans having a conversation, right? So empathy goes a long way.
I love that. I put that, I almost don't even consider it like a comedy skill just because it's at the top. Everything else falls into empathy. If you want to be a good communicator, a problem solver, if you want to have a political debate, if you just, whatever, it all comes down to the fact that you're talking to another human, and you need to remember that, and it'll do wonders for you in your life. Okay, Callum. So we're going to wrap this thing up. We'll put all the links, all the books, everything you talked about in the show notes. Any parting words of wisdom for the future change makers listening to this?
No, I just want to thank you for having me on as a guest. I felt honored to be asked, to be honest. And not a lot of people talk about sales specifically to high school students. So, hopefully it resonated with a few people out there, and hopefully get a few people more interested in exploring tech as an industry.
I think it will, man. And I think things like Uvaro are going to go a long way to making people understand that sales isn't what they think it is because of that movie they watched 20 years ago, right? So thank you for taking the time to help spread that message and elevate this profession, and we'll talk soon. Thanks, Callum.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Damien.